Hi, this is Julian for Pro Tools Expert, and in the A to Z of UAD, we've reached the letter N, and in Pro Audio, N really has to be Neve. I've had a look, and the 88RS plugin hasn't been looked at very closely, so I thought I'd have a look myself. So, the Neve 88RS is a current product. It was released in 2001, and it's no holds barred, no compromises, very high-end analog console, and it's absolutely lovely. People who can have what they want very often have one of these, so that's something to keep in mind when looking at it. There are two versions. There's a legacy version, which is this one here. This has been around for a little while, and it's extremely good, and it models the gate, compressor, equalizer sections, and the filters with a little bit of channel strip functionality, things like phase and stuff from the channel strip. However, there is a unison version, this version here, which models the input stage, models the output stage as well, and the filters, the expander gate, the compressor limiter, and the EQ section as well. The biggest difference that you'll find using these is the DSP hit. The new version, the unison version, is lovely, but that does come with at a corresponding cost in terms of DSP. If I make this one inactive, at the moment I'm running everything I can on my Apollo Twin Duo, and I'm at 95%. If I bypass this, we'll see that's most of 25% on a Duo, whereas if I bypass the legacy version, tiny hit of about 3% maybe. So yeah, that's the difference. And in sonic terms, the dynamic section and the equalizer section is very presentable in here. The one thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't model the input stage, and as we'll see, this you can overdrive and get some very nice things going on. This is purely clean. So having a look at the unison version in action, if we take a quick tour, we'll see we've got the input stages. We've got mic and line, both modelled from the hardware. Something very nice that you can do is you can run line sources into the mic input and get some distortion and things like that going on, which it does extremely well. There's pads and polarity switch as well. We've got a filter section, which is separate from the EQ section. So if you're putting your EQ pre or post dynamics, that doesn't include the filters. We've got high and low pass filters. Low pass filters, I think, are kind of neglected in audio production, certainly not in synthesis, but something I really enjoyed about the Midas 8-channel preamp that I looked at some time ago was that as well as a high pass filter, it included a low pass filter, which I think is a nice thing to see. On the hardware, you pull the knob to activate. Here you click on the pull switch and you get a corresponding movement. The dynamic section features a expander gate and a compressor limiter. On the hardware, these share a gain control element, so the same VCA is doing the gate and doing the compression or limiting. It's arranged vertically with makeup gain, threshold, ratio, and here switchable fast, slow attack time, although the slow isn't especially slow. And the release time has auto. If you click on auto, there you go, and you've got some auto release. I'm a fan of auto release, and I do use it unless I've got a reason not to. For the gate, we've got hysteresis, which we won't go into right now, other than saying it's kind of like having a separate threshold for signals which are coming up towards the threshold compared to ones which are coming down to the threshold. So different thresholds for up and down in terms of the direction of level change. Threshold, again, pull for slow and fast attack, and a release time. You can insert the EQ into the sidechain for de-essing duties and stuff like that, although I have to say, given the tools available for de-essing, I'd be surprised if I found myself doing this using this particular plugin, but people did do that on consoles back in the day. Over to the EQ section, switchable EQ. You can change the EQ to be pre-dynamics if you want. By default, it's post-dynamics. And here we have high, mid, and low. The high and low sections are switchable to shelf filters. They're Bell by default, and we've got full parametric for the high and low EQ, high and low mid EQs. quite a bit of overlap between. Something I forgot to mention when we were looking at the dynamics section was that if you run out of range on the threshold, you can go on the gate to minus 25 dB and minus 20 on the compressor. You can increase that by 40 dB or 20 dB respectively by clicking here, which is a very handy thing to know once you know it's there. Down at the bottom, we can bypass. And then over to here in the meters, we've got the gate expander gain reduction meter. We have the limiter compressor gain reduction meter, we've got VU meter for level, and there are two output controls. There's the fader, and then there's this one here, which doesn't have a counterpart in the hardware. This is modelled, so if you turn this up or turn this down, you get a corresponding sonic effect, whereas this is entirely clean. So if, for example, you wanted to overdrive the input or overdrive from here, you can match the levels using this output, and that doesn't do anything other than change the level. It has no sonic contribution, but great for level matching when you're comparing A being the effect with and without. So what does it sound like? I think it sounds fantastic. If we play some drums, I've got an instance on kick, on snare. I've got the legacy version on toms because I'm using it actually mostly just for some expansion and a little bit of EQ. And I've also got something on the subgroup master. So if I just bypass them all as one, and you'll hear the effect with and without, it's nothing extreme going on. Now some of that is just the effect of EQ versus no EQ, but there's something else going on as well, and I think it sounds lovely. So now I've frozen the drum tracks and freed up some DSP to bring in some 88RS instances on some other tracks. Here it is in use on bass. What I've done is, rather than run into the mic and distort really obviously, I've gone for something slightly subtler. So running into the line input, I've driven this, and it's just introduced a little bit of fur on the sound, but pulled it back using the clean attenuation available from this output knob, and I think it sounds lovely with a little bit of EQ and some reasonably firm compression. I think you'll agree that sounds a bit warmer and lovelier. So what do I think of it? I really like the gain staging in the way that you can introduce distortion at different points along the signal chain. I also especially like the EQ. You do pay a price because it does carry a considerable DSP hit, but there is always the legacy version if you just want access to those features without that DSP hit. But unfortunately, you do miss out on the possibility of introducing all that lovely dirt. But it's a great thing. I've been Julian, and I hope to see you next time.